Sofia Reyes was 8 years old and had one job on the Family Feud stage: to cheer for her grandmother. She was doing it in Spanish, the only language she had spoken from birth, the language her grandmother Esperanza had used to sing her to sleep, the language of the home they shared in San Antonio, Texas. And she was doing it loudly and joyfully, and without any awareness whatsoever that joy could be unwelcome in a room. Then a 51-year-old man named Gary Pruitt, from the competing families section, leaned across the aisle between the audience bleachers and said, in a voice intended to carry, "This is America. Speak English or go back to Mexico." Sofia stopped cheering. She looked at the man. She looked at her grandmother at the podium. Her grandmother had heard. Her grandmother's hands had tightened on the podium, and Steve Harvey, who had also heard, who was standing at center stage with his microphone, who had hosted this show long enough to know that the silence that falls on a room when a child has been told they do not belong sounds different from every other kind of silence. Steve Harvey set down his host cards and said, "Hold on. We need to stop right here." What he did next, not the confrontation, but what came after the confrontation, what he built in the 18 minutes that followed, would be seen by 350 million people and would cause every major television commentator in America to ask the same question: how have we never seen this on television before? It was Friday, March 8, 2019, at the Trilith Studios complex in Atlanta, Georgia. The Reyes family from San Antonio, Texas, had flown in that morning. Esperanza Reyes, 64. Her daughter Carmen, 38. Carmen's husband Miguel, 41. And their daughter Sofia, 8, who had been allowed to miss a day of school because this was the kind of thing you didn't miss. They were a family who had been in Texas for 3 generations on Esperanza's side, a fact that Esperanza could document in detail if asked, which she sometimes was, which she considered one of the more exhausting aspects of being a dark-haired woman named Esperanza in Texas in the 21st century. Esperanza was the team's anchor, 64 years old, quick-witted, English fluent, with the particular fluency of someone who has conducted the majority of her adult life in a second language and has become more precise in it than most native speakers. She ran a tortilla business out of her home kitchen that supplied 4 local restaurants. She had been invited onto the show by Carmen, who had submitted the application as a Mother's Day gift. The competing team was the Pruitt family from Birmingham, Alabama: Gary, 51, his wife Linda, 48, and 3 adult children. The first 2 rounds had been competitive. The Pruitt family was leading by 18 points. Sofia had been cheering from the audience bleachers since the first question, in Spanish, loudly, with the unself-conscious commitment of an 8-year-old who has not yet learned that the world has opinions about her voice. And then Gary Pruitt told her to stop. And nobody in that studio was ready for what Steve Harvey did next. Gary Pruitt was not a man who would have described himself as the kind of man who said such things to children. He was the kind of man who described himself as a straight talker, a patriot, a person who said what everyone was thinking. He managed a car parts distribution warehouse in Birmingham. He coached his grandchildren's baseball team. He went to church on Sundays and considered himself, with no particular irony, a good Christian man. The language he used, speak English or go back to Mexico, was language he had heard in his own household growing up. Language he had deployed in private conversations. Language he maintained was simply the expression of a reasonable preference for national unity. He had deployed it this time semi-publicly, in a studio audience, because an 8-year-old girl was cheering in Spanish, and he had found it irritating, and had not, in that moment, made any calculation about what happened after you said such things on a live microphone in front of 300 people, and a full camera crew, and a television host standing 15 feet away. Sofia Reyes had not fully processed the words before she registered their effect. What she processed first was the silence that followed, the sudden, complete stillness that fell over the people immediately around her, including her mother Carmen, who had gone rigid beside her, and the production assistant who had been managing the audience section, who had turned to face the man with an expression that made Sofia understand, at 8 years old, that whatever had just been said was not a normal thing to say. Sofia looked at her grandmother. Esperanza's hands had tightened on the podium. She had not turned around. She was looking straight at the scoreboard with the expression of a woman who has survived 64 years of various versions of this moment by deciding, each time, that she would not give the moment what it was asking for. Sofia did not have 64 years of practice. She was 8. Her lip was shaking. Steve Harvey had turned from the scoreboard when he heard Gary Pruitt's voice. He had excellent hearing, he was 15 feet away, and the studio's ambient microphone had done the rest. He looked at Sofia's lip. He looked at Esperanza's hands on the podium. He looked at Carmen, frozen in the audience section, and he set down his host cards. "Hold on," he said. "We need to stop right here." He walked to the edge of the stage, directly in front of the audience section where Gary Pruitt was seated. He stood at the edge and looked down at Gary Pruitt and said, in the deliberate, measured voice that had been used on this stage for every significant moment, "Sir, I need you to stand up." Gary Pruitt stood. He had not yet organized an expression. He was still in the phase where he expected the room to agree with him. "What you just said to that little girl," Steve said, "is not going to be left where you put it. So we are going to address it right now, in front of everybody, and then we are going to move forward. Because that child deserves to hear what I am about to say." He turned away from Gary Pruitt and crouched down at the edge of the stage so that he was at eye level with Sofia Reyes, 8 years old, sitting in the audience bleachers with her lips still shaking. "Sofia," he said, "can you come up here?" Sofia looked at her mother. Carmen nodded. Sofia walked to the stage. She was wearing a yellow dress with small sunflowers on it, and she climbed the 2 steps to the stage and stood in front of Steve Harvey, and he was still crouched down, so they were the same height, and he said, "What's your abuela's name?" "Esperanza," Sofia said. Her voice was small, but not absent. "And what does Esperanza mean?" Steve said. Sofia thought about it. "Hope," she said. "Hope," Steve repeated. He stood, took her hand, and walked her to the podium where Esperanza was standing. He placed Sofia's hand in her grandmother's hand. Then he looked at the camera. He looked at the audience. He looked at every person in that room and every person who would ever watch. "This woman's name means hope," he said. "She has been in this country. Her family has been in this country for 3 generations. She runs a business. She raised a daughter. She is standing on this stage because her daughter loves her and wanted to give her something to remember. And this little girl," he looked at Sofia, standing beside her grandmother, their hands still connected. This little girl cheered for her grandmother in her grandmother's language, in the language of the home they share, in the language her grandmother used to sing her to sleep. He stopped. "That is not a problem. That is love. And love does not need to be spoken in English to be understood." The studio fell completely silent. 300 people were not moving. "I want to say something to Mr. Pruitt," Steve said. He turned to where Gary Pruitt was still standing in the audience section. His voice did not change in volume or heat. "What you said today, you said it to an 8-year-old girl who is cheering for the person she loves most in the world. I want you to sit with that. Not for me. Not for this room. I want you to go home tonight and sit with the fact that you said those words to an 8-year-old child, and think about what that means about what is inside you, and decide whether that is the person you want to keep being." He paused. "Security is going to walk you out of the building now. Not because I'm angry at you. Because what this family needs right now is not your presence. They need space. And they deserve it." 2 security guards came from the stage entrance. Gary Pruitt looked at his wife. Linda Pruitt was looking at the floor. He went with the security guards without speaking. Steve turned back to the stage, to Esperanza and Sofia, still holding hands, to Carmen and Miguel in the audience. He walked to Esperanza directly. "Señora Reyes," he said, "I want to apologize to you for what happened in this room today. On behalf of this show, and on behalf of this stage, and personally, as a man who understands what it means to be told you don't belong somewhere that you belong in completely." He paused. "You belong here. Sofia belongs here. Your family belongs here. And I want to say one more thing in Spanish, if that's all right." He looked at Sofia. "¿Me ayudas?" he said. "Will you help me?" Sofia's eyes went wide. She nodded. Steve Harvey, in front of 300 people and a national camera, said 3 sentences in Spanish. Imperfect, clearly a second-language speaker. Not performing fluency, but making the gesture, making the point, making absolutely certain that the language of that family was welcome on his stage. Sofia corrected his pronunciation on one word. The audience laughed, the warm, healing kind. Steve laughed too. "She's right," he said to the room. But Steve wasn't done. He pulled out his phone. He called a bilingual education nonprofit operating in Texas and announced a grant for bilingual classroom resources in San Antonio public schools, named, on the spot, the Sofia Esperanza Fund. He then called the dean of a culinary and small business school in San Antonio and arranged for Esperanza Reyes to receive a full business development scholarship, covering marketing, distribution, and commercial kitchen licensing. Everything needed to take her tortilla business from 4 restaurant clients to a regional operation. He turned to the Pruitt family's remaining members, Linda and the 3 adult children, who had been sitting in their family section in various stages of shame. Their oldest son, Tyler, 28, stood up without being asked and crossed to the Reyes family section and said, "To Carmen, I'm sorry. For all of us." Carmen looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Tyler sat back down. Both families received the full prize. Steve announced it looking directly at Sofia. "You cheered in the right language," he told her. "Don't ever change that." Sofia Reyes looked up at him and said, in Spanish and without hesitation, "I won't." The episode aired May 21, 2019. Within 24 hours, 120 million views. Within 6 weeks, 350 million. The most viewed moment from the show's current run at that point. The hashtag Esperanza Means Hope trended in 62 countries for 14 days. The clip was broadcast by major television networks in Mexico, Spain, Argentina, Colombia, and Chile. It was referenced in the Spanish Parliament, in the Mexican Senate, and in a United Nations committee discussion on the rights of linguistic minorities. It was used in 600 U.S. school districts as a classroom discussion resource. Gary Pruitt's wife Linda gave one interview, 3 months after the taping, to a local Birmingham news outlet. She said, "I should have stopped him. I didn't. I've been trying to understand why for 3 months. I think I was afraid of what stopping him would have meant, what it would have started between us. The answer to that question is also the thing I've been working on in therapy." Their son Tyler attended a bilingual cultural exchange program in San Antonio in the fall of 2019. He has not spoken publicly about it. He went. 3 months after the taping, the Sofia Esperanza Fund distributed its first 40 classroom resource grants to bilingual teachers in San Antonio public schools. Enrollment in the fund's second cycle, 110 applications. The fund now operates in 14 Texas school districts. 6 months after the taping, Esperanza Reyes completed her first module of the Business Development Scholarship. Her tortilla business, renamed Esperanza's, had expanded from 4 restaurant clients to 11. By the end of the year, she had hired 2 part-time employees. By the following spring, she was supplying a regional grocery chain. A year after the taping, Sofia Reyes wrote a letter to Steve Harvey for a second-grade class assignment about a person she admired. The assignment was to describe what the person did and what it meant. Sofia wrote 3 paragraphs. The last paragraph said, "He talked to me in Spanish even though he doesn't know Spanish very good. He tried." That is the best thing. When people try even when they don't have to. Her teacher submitted the letter to the Harvey Foundation. It now hangs, framed, in the Foundation's Atlanta headquarters. Below it, on a small typed card, are Sofia's words, "When people try even when they don't have to." Esperanza Reyes still sings to Sofia in Spanish. Sofia is 10 now. She has started teaching her friends Spanish words, not because anyone asked her to, not because it is assigned, because she decided, sometime in the year after the taping, that the language of her home is not something to put away. It is something to give. The little girl in the yellow dress with the sunflowers cheers in 2 languages now. She is very loud. She is not sorry about it. If this story about Sofia and Esperanza, and the afternoon that told them they belonged, moved you, subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to know that love does not need to be spoken in English to be understood. Have you ever witnessed someone stand up for a child in a moment like this? Tell us in the comments. Ring the notification bell for more stories about the moments when the right person says the right thing.